Welcome to Wednesday in Westeros. I'm Taylor Trask.
I'm Todd A.
And we are back. It is season 7, episode 5, Eastwatch. And we're jumping right on in. It's happened. We're talking about this on a Tuesday night in between episodes. And there's a lot to look at, I think, in this particular one. Todd, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing well. We only got 2 more episodes left this season, which is not cool. And then just to rub it in, I had a friend the other day say like, oh, what are they wrapping this up in like a couple weeks? And I was like, no, dude, there's another whole season.
Yeah. Well, a half season.
Yeah, exactly. It just means we got to wait for another year or something for them to wrap it up.
That's well, and maybe not even a year. It may go, shoot, I'm wondering at this juncture if we're going to get it in 2018. I really do.
I mean, please.
Really wonder.
I just hope it's like, it would be even better if they just put it out by the end of the year. As soon as you're done, put out the episodes.
I know, and they could put. I mean, what they should do is just put them all out at one. Just drop them all on HBO Go, just in one big bingeable weekend.
Oh my God, that would be incredible.
I mean, that's kind of what they need to do. Like at the pace they're going, I would say this whole season has been the most bingeable season, I think, since maybe 1.
Well, I wondered when to bring up this comment, but I've been seeing a lot of criticism online of like how quickly they're moving and like the time jumps, where, they'll send a raven and the very next scene is someone receiving it. And I'm all in favor of that. And
oh, totally.
I mean, if anything, to me, Game of Thrones has they really tested our patience for 6 years. Mm-hmm. And I get that like there's some stuff that's happening pretty quickly. One of the criticisms I saw today was that these big reunions that should have like a more emotional impact, and I assume they mean like Jorah, are getting skipped over, or just like pushed out because the next plot point has to happen. And I'm like, yeah, it's because they wasted so damn much time on like this crazy slave journey he had that went nowhere or whatever. I mean, it's like I'm totally in favor of this time jumping and this we can resolve to everything.
We can take it one of 2 ways. We can take it the way it's going, which is like, hey, we're going to sort of betray the pacing of the show up to this point because story is more important. Like just getting shit into the story canon and out is more important than sort of the mechanics of the show up to this point. I like that. The other option is to do it, and I'll always use this comparison, what Lost did, which is, hey, we've set a tempo and we really don't want to mess with that. So even though we have 5 seasons worth of story to cram into like a season and a half, we're just going to take our time. And that was, I think, universally agreed upon as not the best or optimal decision. So
I'm with you. I got kind of worried in the first 2 episodes of the season that's what they were going to do. And that this short season was going to be all these slow, dramatic unfoldings. And the next season would be like sort of 6 big battles. And I thought that'll just be worse for the pacing,
Oh, totally.
But overall, I've been pretty happy with this season. In fact,
and it's made sense too, right? It's made sense in the logic of the story for, people might say, well, why Daenerys hasn't even attacked King's Landing yet. I'm like, she doesn't need to, right?
No.
It's like
Save that for next year.
Yeah, but what they've shown us, it all makes logical story sense in the way that the show has set it up. They're not doing something crazy out of the ordinary just for spectacle or just to rush us along. I'm actually surprised that the White Walkers haven't brought down the wall yet or haven't invaded. I thought that may have happened by now. So it's the fact that they're holding that card or that chess piece to either the Ned's head, which is this coming Sunday, or the final episode, which is more likely. I think I love that. I love that fact.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show because I've got some notes on that for our sort of preview of next episode. But totally. What were your general thoughts of this episode?
This episode was a little different for me, especially after last week, which was Spoils of War, right? Or no, Spoils of War, which was just epic on every level. This episode felt almost like a season premiere. Right? It had sort of like, if you take last week as almost like a finale episode, this almost kind of felt like it was reintroducing you to certain characters, kind of just taking its time here and there. and that's not necessarily good or bad. What struck me about this particular episode is that they are starting to play. This is the first time I definitively noticed the show starting to play fast and loose with details, just like Lost did. Like,
what's an example of that?
So in Lost, they would tee up character moments. Let me give you a comparison.
Okay.
But like in Lost, they tee up character moments or key things to never pay them off. Like they'd spend like 5-10 minutes like, hey, this is a thing about this person, and then you never hear about it again. And I feel like this is the first time, and we see it right out of the gate where, there's a whole big hullabaloo about Daenerys, making everyone bend the knee or face, extinction by fire, and kind of getting her mad queen on. That's followed up by a Varys Tyrion scene where they're like, hey, something's wrong. And then just like that was almost erased, and she became just, queen mom again by the end of the episode. And I'm like, are we not? Is that, and I'll reserve judgment until season's end, because maybe they'll pay it off down the road, in the next episode. But like, I just feel like it's the cracks are starting to show a little bit at how fast they're moving and how sort of, and I feel like it's more indicative of the breakneck writing pace than the actual story or show itself. Like, I feel like they had to write these things so fast, they just didn't. I feel like some of these things could have used another draft or two. And there's also a lot of, real quick, there's also a lot of scenes of convenience. Like IO9 points out this whole season, like, we've had things like Sam. For example, in this episode, Sam just happens to be wheeling in some very important documents during a very important Maester meeting, just so he can hear the information that's, super duper important that Bran sent. Like, there's no reason Sam should have been walking in right then and there, but he was, so like a lot of things that are kind of just happening that are, in my mind, unearned.
Well, you're kind of leaning into that criticism I brought up at the outset about it moving too fast. But to me, Sam walking in, that's where you have the story. If he didn't walk in at that moment, like we wouldn't have any motivation for him to do anything, I think.
Yeah, and I get that. But Benioff and Weiss and their writing cohorts have proven they typically reach for a higher standard. And like, I felt like that was almost like a lazy kind of like, well, he'll just be there when it happens. And it's like, well, no, there's another way you could have done that,
Yeah, well, I granted, you're right. Like, that is them having to, get with it. Like the writing pace of the show, they didn't have time to like come up with different solutions for it. It was like, no, he's got to hear it.
And I'll talk more. Well, and I'll talk more about Sam and just kind of it's like we wasted so much time this season on some things we didn't need to, that could have been better spent getting us to point A or B in these latter episodes. And I just feel like there's a disconnect. It's not hurting my enjoyment of the show, but it's starting to, what sort of was this like perfect system is kind of starting to show its wear and tear a little bit more as we head towards the end. And I feel like, honestly, it and this is the writer in me coming out, I feel like they're more interested in Dany mowing down a bunch of Lannisters and the Night King and all that, and like the little details to get us to those big moments aren't as interesting to them, so they're just kind of throwing them on the board. Whereas in seasons past, they would have kind of gotten in. Yeah, the details would have been as important, or just were more interesting than the end game. So I feel like it's kind of a little bit of a shift. Again, I'm still rolling with it, but it's worth pointing out.
Yeah, I don't know how to justify those two things. I grant that like what really, drew us all into the show were those long character developments and things like that. But and I don't I know it's too harsh to say they wasted a bunch of time somewhere, but I don't know. I just hope that when someone sits down and writes like a definitive criticism of the Song of Ice and Fire and its adaptation Game of Thrones, they point out like, there are some big flaws in adapting this work and just in the novel and George Martin's novels too. I mean, they just, like we've said, like I've said at least over and over, those last two go nowhere. Mm-hmm. And it's, you talk about like empty exposition. I would much rather trade that for dragons mowing down Lannisters.
Let me ask you this. Put yourself in the minds and bodies of Benioff and Weiss, who have been working on this now for 7 years. This is their 7th year, because they would have started in 2010, maybe before, but definitely in 2010, writing season 1, which came out in 2011. Like they've been with this 7+ years. if that were you and you were adapting the same exact thing, do you feel like you might get burnt out? Do you feel like you're like, oh my God, we've been doing this largely on our own, because they have some co-writers, but they pretty much carry most of the heavy weight. Do you think that they're just like kind of burnt out on this? Like they're already talking about their next HBO show, which is also getting a lot of controversy. I wonder how invested in this they still are, or if they're just like, man, we want to see the big payoff moments, but we're just like, we're kind of burnt out on it. Does that feel like something that would happen to you? Because as I put it in that context for myself, I think maybe, if it was something I created that was solely mine, I don't think that would be as much of a problem. But if it's like, they spent most of this time adapting another guy's work and they might love it, but they also might just be like, man, we just want to do our own thing. what do you feel about that?
I think I have total sympathy for the writers of Game of Thrones. I think I would be in the same place. Like I would feel, they started this probably thinking that Martin would be done with at least one more book, which originally it was going to be a trilogy. Then it was going to be 5. Then it was going to be just one more to wrap up. Now it's going to be 2 more to wrap up. It's like, how could they have known that 7 years in they would not have his instructions on how to end it? So yeah,
exactly. Well, before we go on any further, I'd like to introduce, she's just flown in on her dragon, Emily Kelly, first of her name, maker of video games, mother of cats, Khaleesi of fan theories, the Get Turned, and of course ruler of her condo. Emily Kelly, welcome.
Hi. I think the intro gets longer like every week, but I kind of like it.
It does. I told Taylor I was adding things.
I like Khaleesi of fan theories. That's my favorite.
We're just gonna keep going. We're just gonna keep going and we'll just start playing purple. Let's Go Crazy behind it. Just like, damn. But it's a great time to bring you in, Emily. I don't know how much of that you heard, but like, what was your overall impression of the episode? And I guess take that into a bigger question. What's your up to this point now? What has been your impression of season 7 thus far?
Well, for me, this episode was maybe my favorite Game of Thrones episode of all time. Mm-hmm. Because it was just like, there's just like so much to like in it. And there's always stuff to dislike, but just like throughout this whole episode, I was just kind of like screaming with joy internally and sometimes externally, much to the grin of my partner of like, he's like, can you shut up? Like they're still talking. But no. And I feel like it's kind of funny, like, as much as we complained about the other seasons, like, oh my God, why is this taken 10,000 years? And then now there's complaints of like, why is this so fast? But for me, like, I like this breakneck speed that we're going into, because it's like the last season of Lost, of where they're just like, oh my God, we only have 20 episodes or whatever to like get all this wrapped up, all this nonsense that we've created. Like, oh my God, we have to do this. And so it was like a bunch of characters died. Sorry if you haven't seen Lost, it's been like 6 years, my bad. But like, they solved a lot of questions. And I think that's just what they're doing for this. Wow. They're like, we only have 14 more episodes to wrap up this whole thing. Like, we kind of have to get things. I like that, because I was sick of like these plot lines that take 10,000 years.
I will argue that the Game of Thrones is actually applying itself to solving those mysteries and problems, unlike Lost. But
exactly. Like true. And then like the payoff is much more gratifying, because you're like, yes, Gendry's back. Oh my God, this is amazing. Not just like, oh, so he was the smoke monster this whole time. Like, okay, great.
You raise a good point though. This is an episode of a lot of payoffs, a lot of both big and small. And we're gonna cover a lot of them. I guess you want to just jump right into the nuts and bolts of the episode.
Yeah,
let's do it. Let's start after what I'm gonna call after the fire. After last week's just bloody amazing, cliffhanger / just awesome feat of television that we've been waiting years for. Of course, you got to see what happens next, and what happens is, Daenerys is there. She's, all the surviving Lannisters, if there are any, are kind of hanging around. And of course, we find out right off the bat, Jaime and Bronn are alive. Who'd have thought? And Bronn has dragged his heavy ass out of the bottom of that lake. Was that surprising to anybody? Did anybody think that wasn't going to happen so effortlessly?
No.
Yeah, I thought it would be effortless, but I did wonder if they would be captured. I was honestly a little surprised with them emerging several miles down the river.
Yeah, that is a little weird. And she, Daenerys saw it happen, so it's like it's not like she's like, oh, I wonder where they went. She's like, no, you saw them jump right into that lake. Like,
so did Tyrion.
Yeah, it's like,
and then there's this weird thing where they set up the secret meeting later between Tyrion and Jaime. They could have gotten there if they'd just taken them prisoner and then said, oh, you know what? Why don't we have Tyrion deliver Jaime to Cersei and they can have this sort of
oh my god
armistice talk.
See, right there, perfect example of what would have happened, I think, in seasons past. And I'm just like that seems like a classic Benioff Weiss move.
Well, I don't think we want to see Jaime as a prisoner again. I mean, then it's like, we're just repeating the same crap over and over. So
Tyrion as his captor, I think it would have been had a little different context. They were going to like knock off his hand again or anything like that. It was almost like a political prisoner. More than just a prisoner. But I don't know. There's been a lot of consternation about, well, Jaime's armor weighs X amount of pounds. And, there's no way another single man could have dragged him all the way out. Bronn must have been really strong. And I'm just like, those are the details I don't really care about. Like, I'm like, who cares? Like, it happened.
It's also like she burst 3 dragons from a fire and stone eggs. Okay. But you're worried about the weight of his armor. It's fine.
Yeah. But we see those guys, they make it out. Daenerys is then, and I love the shot of Drogon kind of,
oh my God,
slumbering on top of the hill. And like, I will say this about this show. They so understand how to like render CGI dragons. Like everything we saw last week and this week, Drogon looks killer, like literally and figuratively. Like he looks amazing and dangerous as hell. Like, and just the fact that he's kind of like a lazy cat, who's just got done playing, like hanging out on the mountain while, his mom is reading everybody the riot act. I thought that was just a cool looking shot. And I love too, where, Daenerys is like, she's doing her spiel that we saw in the trailer. She's like, bend the knee or die. And like, right away, like, a bunch of guys like immediately bend the knee. And I'm like, yeah, that probably would have been me. It's like, I'm not screwing around here. You clearly are the winner here. And
well, in fairness to Daenerys, because I give her so much crap, it wasn't really that tyrannical. It was very level-headed and like, we're going to stop the wheel that it just crushes all of everyone except for the Cerseis of the world under it. Mm-hmm. So, she was saying like, I'm not going to be your Cersei, and which I thought was, that's where she should be. That was a good thing.
Until she burns Dickon on his dad. Well, never.
Did you have a problem with that?
I didn't have a problem with his dad, but if I was one of the Lannisters and I'm like, okay, or one of the army anyway, and I'm like, okay, we know Cersei blew up the Sept, and we know like, they, during the Battle of the Blackwater, they just burned everybody with wildfire. Here's our potential new queen, and yeah, she said, I have to do it. I can't make empty threats. But just the fact that, she could have made an exception or could have maybe finessed that a little bit more. I don't know. Maybe not. I would have, if I was bending down right then, I would have been like, this kind of feels like more of the same to some extent. She's just burning whoever crosses her.
Emily, you stood up for the Tarleys' loyalty to, whatever house they were, Terrell house that they were pledged to. So how do you feel about this? Yeah. This burning?
I mean, it was sucky, and I think you could kind of see it like
really
I could see it on both sides where, Tyrion was right to argue like you can't just go around burning a great house of Westeros. That it makes people afraid of you. It doesn't make people want to follow you, that kind of logic. And I get that, but she was right of like, I need to make sure that they know that I'm serious. Like, that I can't just say, hey, bend the knee or die, and then not kill anyone. Like that. And she was, I think she was very respectful to him, to Tarly. Like she called him my lord and allowed for this argument with Tyrion of, that the son would be spared and whatever. And I think she went about it in a good way, but it's kind of sucky that it has to happen. Even though in the books, Randall Tarly is like way more of a dick because we see him a little bit more dick and digging. So it's kind of weird, but I think it puts us in this position now where like Sam is in a really like awkward sort of position. He doesn't know yet
But he's essentially lord of that house now, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, from a technicality, the father had disowned him, and that's why he went to the wall originally. But I'm sure that they could make an argument like, look, he's dead, and my son, this is my last remaining son, and blah, blah, blah. You know, like, I'm sure something will come about it. I don't know if he'll actually be named Lord of Hornhall, or Hornhill, whatever it is. But it does make it very interesting now that Sam could be a bigger player in the game, just besides, reading books and not listening to his girlfriend.
I'll tell you what's just shocking is that I am on the other side of this. Totally in favor of Dickon and Randall getting burned.
Yeah, like I'm not sad about it.
Yeah. I mean, I just thought the whole the last of their house kind of thing was a weak argument. And I almost wish Daenerys had been stronger and said, like, yeah, they participated in wiping out that other great house. So now their house pays.
Ooh, good.
I just thought, Tyrion could have been more. I don't know. I appreciated Tyrion sticking up there because he is the Westerosi, lord. He's in that world and she's not. But so I thought that was true to his character, but he could have been a bigger critic of your loyalties seem flexible. I would have said, it seems like you don't have any loyalties.
Yeah.
So why don't you shut up and take the black? Anyway,
that's a good point. Well, let me ask you this then. No, but I like your context there. So you're painting this to be pretty reasonable, which then almost makes Tyrion and Varys' dialogue that we see next almost all the more worthless, because that was that thing where they tease it up in the trailer. Varys is like, you need to get her to listen, and it's just like it had all these like overtones and foreshadowing of like her mad king tendencies are coming out, oh my god, and it didn't go anywhere. And it's like, and especially if you, Todd, had that point of view, I'm sure many others did too, like what was the point of that scene, if anything? Was it just another wasted sort of scene?
I mean, we always sort of bring it up to make fun of it, I think, or I do. Maybe in George R. R. Martin's outline to Benioff and Weiss, it said there's like a bullet point that was like Varys and Tyrion will discuss whether she is a mad queen. And so they're like, yep, check that off.
Well, he does say too, like, she's not her dad or whatever. Like, she's not Aegon or Aerys or whatever. And so, but still, it was like, I just think of it too, like, I always bristle at scenes like that of like, don't keep trying to tell her what to do. Like, hey, men folk, like she knows what she's doing. Like, you were the ones who gave her all this terrible advice before, and now she's getting it for herself and she's finally winning. Like, I think that they still have this sense that they need to be in control of her and they need to just check themselves and buy some dragons.
It was kind of like a Jewish mother scene, the young upstart son is off doing something. They're just like, I don't understand. He's really putting himself out there. I'm a little nervous. He's too much. He needs to pull back a little bit. It was that sort of had that vibe to it where they're just, they're like just gossiping behind the scenes, not really doing anything, not really not giving it any meaning or purpose. And I feel like I'm a little bit more perturbed by scenes like that only because that's 5 to 7 minutes now that could have been used for something else that, they need to get a little bit more efficient on where they're putting their time, unless, Todd, like you said, it's just a checkbox, which would be hilarious if that's the case.
Well, now I do want Woody Allen to come in playing that character that you just embodied.
I mean, that's what Varys reminded me of. He's just like, I don't know. She's a little worrisome. I'm just like, Varys, come on. You knew what you signed up for. You knew what this was all about. You knew what she's going to do. This shouldn't be surprising to any of you.
It's like they've planted it because later on she's going to do something else and they're going to wonder about it, or it really, it just feels like kind of a checkbox thing. I think in seasons past that would have been a developing thing, but it's sort of a nod to the past way of storytelling, but they just can't dwell on it. They don't have any time.
Well, something that is, I'm sure, a checkbox is Jon meeting Drogon face to face, man to dragon, which was a glorious scene, largely dialogue free, and just epic. Again, Drogon looked amazing, but just that was a really cool thing to see. Emily, I mean, how did that feel to you, knowing kind of, just how much you love, Daenerys? Is that play well for you, Emily?
We've got a bad signal, Emily.
You got a bad signal. You can call back in. Todd, I'll ask you that question while she calls back in. How did that play for you, the Jon the Dragon Master scene?
I really, I mean, I just love the way it was shot, and I really loved like her, Daenerys sort of peeking out, over, like peeking over the dragon to see how Drogon was reacting to Jon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but I mean,
she was giving him some pretty serious doomy eyes, though. Let's be honest. Like,
oh yeah,
this is the first time where she's like, "Ooh, who's that? Wow, he likes my pet. Well, not a pet. It's like he likes my kid. Like, this is." It did kind of feel like, like that single mom meeting like the dad, the dude who'd be really nice to her kids. Just kind of had that vibe to it. I don't know how much creepier that makes that. I'm one of those people who I kind of don't care. The show has firmly established the fact that incest is kind of acceptable on some levels in this world. It is, this is probably we've talked about this. We talked about it last week. I feel like, it's, if they end up hooking up, I'm not going to be put off by it. I think it kind of needs to happen, at this juncture.
I think it's a foregone conclusion. Well, I say that because Benioff and Weiss said it in one of the after show things. I mean, they didn't like totally confirm it. They just said like, obviously they have to start falling for each other. So.
I have a little theory I'm going to throw out there. Then I'm not at all original, but it occurred to me during that scene that a song of ice and fire could easily refer to their child.
Yeah, I mean, that's not unheard of, because where is the reference to that? I believe there's something about someone singing a song of ice and fire, and I think it's Rhaegar. So I think it's sort of like Rhaegar was singing a song of ice and fire when Jon was born. So,
because there's a lot of discussion around, is Jon this, like, is his half Targaryen, half Stark lineage, is he really the focal character? And I bring this up because back in the day, like, George R.R. Martin was first approached long before the show started to adapt Game of Thrones as a movie, and the whole pitch was, make Jon Snow the lead character. We'll follow his journey. So we would not have seen hardly any of the other stuff we've seen, like, Ned and King's Landing, all that stuff would have been cut. We would have maybe heard about it or seen reference to it, but it would have been Jon Snow's journey. I'm glad that didn't happen, but just the fact that was kind of the pitch makes me wonder if Jon Snow is like, if at the end of all this, if we're kind of plotting which characters have to make it to the end and which might get knocked off. I wonder if he outlives Dany.
I don't think either of them is going to outlive the other. I don't know. I think there's you mentioned their child being the Song of Ice and Fire, but at least book wise, and I think in the show it's been confirmed, like, she can't have any more kids.
Oh, I did not catch that at all. Interesting.
Yeah, Emily and I talked about that. I think we mentioned it. We may have mentioned it on the preview that just Emily and I did. That Daenerys, it can no longer have children after the witch Ari Maz or whatever.
Yeah.
Worked her spell to save Drogo. So.
Yeah. Let's move on though to probably one of the, again, more frustrating. I don't want to call it a waste of time so much, but it was again just a frustrating scene, and that's Sam and Gilly over in Old Town. And we start. We talked a little bit before about the scene where Sam comes into the Maester meeting, and that it was what it was. And Jim Broadbent's trying his hardest to sell that scene, but it just kind of felt, again, to me, a little limp. That could have happened any number of ways. But I think what was more interesting was just his scene with Gilly. And I remember I as that was going on, I IM'd you, Todd. I was just like, ... that scene where Sam wonders why the hell he brought Gilly along. And I don't know if that's...
She's the only one that's learning the information that we all want to know. I mean...
Yes, but you don't start by going, guess how many windows there are in the Citadel? Guess how many stairs there are? I'm just like, oh God. And you could just see Sam going...
Guess who Rhaegar married?
Yeah, she just drops that in casually.
But she doesn't know. She didn't know she didn't know who any of these people are. She's just reading a list of names.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. To her, it's all the same as like how many bowel movements he had.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Like she doesn't know.
But she does know, like, at this point, she should know kind of what does and doesn't annoy Sam, or like how to get his attention about something important. I would think. I mean, they've been together now for a while.
Sam is also frustrated.
Yeah.
I mean, he's frustrated with the Maesters. So
and I'm not saying. Well, let me clarify that.
I thought he was. I mean, he was totally in the wrong in that whole scene.
He was, and I don't want to give anybody the impression that I think Gilly should be a good little Maester's wife and you'll be dutifully looking after her. Like, that's not what I'm suggesting. What I am suggesting though is that, like, she clearly can read. She's got, she's interested in stuff. It would be, I wish that they would have treated that, if she had just started with the whole Rhaegar thing, he could have still been, distracted and annoyed, but it would have been like, oh wow, Gilly's really showing some steam here. And instead it's just like that same old Gilly patter that's just like, oh God. Really, like, I felt viscerally what Sam's face was doing.
Poor Sam. I think he was just like, it was like the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, he was so just like upset about everything else that he just kind of like took out on her. But I mean, like, whatever the manner it was delivered in, this is like one of the most important pieces of information that we've ever been given.
Yeah,
let's not
skip over it. It was a big deal.
Yeah, like it's a super big, and it's kind of funny, like, that she's the one that like got to tell us, like, 'cause she's such a ancillary character. But I think that's kind of like George R.R. Martin's like thing. Like, he likes to give big pieces of information to characters, like main characters, from characters that you don't really think matter, but then he makes them matter.
Mm-hmm.
Because for this, like, there was always, if you were in the camp, like the L plus R equals J camp, like I was for so many years, like, you always thought like there was something more to these stories, like that Robert Baratheon said that she was kidnapped, that she was raped, like all this stuff, like, that there's this long standing stuff about that they were in love and that Rhaegar really loved her. And this really does wonders to not only prove that he was in love with her, but now it means that Jon is a true-born Targaryen, even if it's still secretly true-born. Like, that matter. It will matter. It will be a big deal, not just to Jon, but like just to the greater world of us who have this impression of Rhaegar Targaryen, and to Dany probably too, to know that her brother was a good man.
Emily, do you think...
I just, like, as soon as they talked about it, I got chills. I was like, oh my God, like, I can't believe they're telling us this.
Yeah, on one hand, the first time I watched it, it felt like that information happened so quickly. Like, I was screaming at the screen, like, holy shit. And then when I rewatched it, I realized, no, it actually took like a minute or so for her to get that out, the annulment back and forth, conversation. And it was just great that information, like, I perceived it as happening so quickly when it was set at a pretty normal pace. It wasn't totally slipped in there. It was delivered. Like, we got all the information we needed, I think. But Emily, do you think that's one of those things that may have been in George Martin's outline that he gave to Benioff and Weiss and said, here they really did get an annulment? Or do you think this is something the showrunners have just made up?
I think that is probably correct. Like, that he always meant to reveal that. So, I mean, just from a geographical lesson about Westeros, where Ned, that we saw where Ned gives birth, or where Lyanna gives birth to Jon Snow, whatever his Targaryen name is in Dorne. Jaehaerys, yeah. So the Tower of Joy is in the Red Mountains of Dorne. And so the fact that they had said, they went down to the secret ceremony in Dorne really lends credibility to this whole thing. Like, that maybe she was already pregnant and then they went down to Dorne and she had been living there in secret while she was pregnant. And then after the war that she was still down there. So, I mean, I think he definitely planned to reveal all this kinds of information to us.
I for some reason did not realize the Tower of Joy was in Dorne. Like, that's a crucial kind of little detail there.
And don't we know why Rhaegar left her in the tower? I mean, yeah. Do you know?
I mean, like, it's not, I don't know if they ever say it outright, but it's basically like Robert Baratheon is pressing in. They're winning the war, this rebellion, and Rhaegar just I think he did it to shield her and to try to lead Robert Baratheon away from wherever they were. Because that's why Robert Baratheon goes to the Trident, which is in the Riverlands, I believe. And so then Ned goes to Dorne to try to retrieve Lyanna. And I think that Rhaegar led Robert Baratheon to the field of battle purposefully so that he would never know that that child was not his son. That the child was Rhaegar's and not Robert Baratheon's because they weren't yet married. That would be my guess. And also that I think Rhaegar was just kind of he loved his dad despite his terrible qualities. And I think he just, he would have felt bad not, coming up to the challenge, being called out like that.
Right.
What's cool about all of that is that we never, like, there's never a flashback, at least yet, where like we see Rhaegar. We know about Rhaegar purely from other people's stories about him or from the whole he left behind, like all the, kind of the legend of, like, which is kind of cool. Like it kind of makes this like mythic, he's almost like a mythic character in that sense, and just the fact that his, Jon being his son demonstrates a lot of what's, good about Lyanna, but also good and wonderful about and true about Rhaegar. Like we get to kind of get glimpses of him from all these different angles to create the character. It's almost like his ghost is kind of constantly present in the show, and it's just the story, which I love. I love that. That's
it's cool.
Let me ask you both this: should Sam have left Old Town? Is that a good decision?
Again, on my first watching of the episode, it felt rushed and I didn't understand it. Like it just felt like this is not really in character for Sam, for him to get so flustered and leave. But I know it's been building. He's been flustered by the slow pace of things in the Citadel. But on my second watching, noticing how many scrolls he grabs, I was a little bit better with it. I just felt like, dude, all the information is in the Citadel. Why don't you just stay there and secretly send ravens?
Yeah.
But he's got the sword. He's now the lord of his house. I think they had to get him out of there quicker. And George R. R. Martin's already left him there for like 2 whole gigantic novels. So
yeah.
Book 6 could just open with and then Sam rejoined Jon, and we would be
yeah. So where do you think he's gonna go though from here?
Maybe back to his house? I don't know.
Yeah, because I think it is legit on the way, because that's why they went there before. He was going to go there because he wanted to leave Gilly or whatever, and then the dad said no. But I think they would have to go through the Reach to reach the Reach, to go back to the Wall or wherever Sam plans to go, or go to Winterfell to be with Jon. So I definitely think that he will stop by I'm pretty sure it's called Hornhill or Hornhill. And Hornhill. Yeah. And that'll be crazy because he doesn't yet know that his dad and brother are dead. And I think that could be sort of a game changer if they do, like we talked about earlier, but like if he is made the Lord of Hornhill, he is now a pretty powerful player in Game of Thrones, as that almost everyone else in the Reach is dead, like that their houses are gone. So
yeah. Interesting. Well, let's move on to Tyrion, Jaime, and Jaime, Cersei. I'm going to kind of lump these all together, just Lannister sibling stuff. I think, in terms of both of those scenes, because Jaime, is the kind of the key character in both. We see again, Jaime, he's kind of proving himself the less adept sibling. Cersei and Tyrion are always the fast thinkers, the more intelligent ones, and Jaime is not, and he knows it. He knows he's not as smart as Tyrion and Cersei. And I love the fact that of all the actors on the show, I would give credit to Nicola Coster-Waldau. He's really taken a character and has evolved it on a really nice organic line from the very first episode, where he was, the villain of the show. Him pushing Bran out that window kind of teed off everything.
Hero.
And it was such a dick move. And now he's like, he's still got some dickish qualities, but he's got a lot of complexity, and he knows his kind of place in the Lannister family. And it was just interesting to see him, have to face Tyrion in one context and then face Cersei in a different context, and how he reacts to both. And you get to kind of see, I'm not sure there's as much brotherly love as there once was. And I think there's even more love between him and he and Cersei now. I don't know. Does that Tyrion Jaime scene, did that do anything for anybody?
Take it away, Emily.
I just really, you're totally right about Nicholas. He's really come a long way. The character too, but as an actor as well. And he's really great, especially in these last couple episodes of when he first sees Tyrion and he is doing this thing like that men always do when they're trying not to cry, is when they're trying not to look at you, or they're like tightening their jaw a lot. And that's what he was doing. Like you could see the tears in his eyes and this kind of like tightening of his jaw. Like, I don't know really what he was thinking of, whether he was good, like it was glad to see Tyrion, or he was still feeling this like hurt of betrayal of killing their dad. Like, but he just like, there's so many, all at once. Like there's so many emotions that like went through his face that was so beautiful and like so well acted. I definitely think there's a lot of love lost there. I still think he really loves Cersei, but I think he's a little bit more wary of Tyrion now, especially that he's with Daenerys. It was definitely a very interesting scene. And it was kind of what we'd been hoping for, that like Bronn was kind of the bridge of these two characters again, that he was the one that brought them together.
It did show. I did like the fact that there wasn't a lot of sentiment between Tyrion and Bronn. He just he left as soon as he hooked those two guys up. He moves on, which is very I like. Bye. But I like that because like from the beginning, Bronn himself said like I'm just a sellsword, man. I'm not your friend.
Yeah, and they reiterated that at the beginning of the episode, where it was like, you're war, pal.
Yeah. And I like that because Bronn's a cool character. You want to like him. You want him to be more virtuous than he is, and it's nice that the show reminds you that ain't just going to happen. He might have a cool moment later on, but like he's still going to be basically kind of a scumbag, and it's nice to kind of get that check. I did like Tyrion's sort of breakdown at just the thought of Tywin. He's like he kind of cracked. He's like, he knew I was innocent and he was going to have me executed. He's like, what the hell do I do with that? And Jaime didn't really have a good answer.
Well, I think, and back to Emily's point about like what Jaime was feeling in that moment, I think Jaime had made this choice that he could live with, which was he told himself that he would kill Tyrion. If I'll let him go, but I will kill him if I see him again. Mm-hmm. And that sort of allowed him to be with Cersei and kind of suspend his disbelief, or, suspend his judgment of Cersei. Like he can live with this obvious lie that he's telling himself about Cersei. If he never has to see Tyrion again. Tyrion's sort of like his, the conscience of the family. So
I like that. Do you think, so speaking of lies, do you think Cersei's pregnancy thing is true or false? Is she faking it?
She's not faking it.
I think it's real for sure. And it's funny because like they all aged up in the show compared to the books, but like in the books, she's still only like late 20s, early 30s. Like she could still definitely get pregnant, even in that world. I mean, it'll be hard, I'm sure, but no, I think she's for real pregnant, which is another sort of like game changer of like, oh God, like now she has something legit to fight for again.
I'm going to take the road that she's faking it. I think she, after seeing the utter devastation of the dragons and knowing Jaime's like, we can't do this. That was kind of her last card to play. It's her going, I'm going to lose my brother's loyalty if, here pretty quick, if I don't sucker him in somehow. And she knew that would be the easiest way. The only caveat to that, where I could be convinced otherwise, is that Qyburn was hanging out in her room before Jaime walked in, and he pointed it out. He's like, why was he in here? She's like, he's my hand. And I'm just like, yeah, but what was he doing? Like anytime Qyburn's anywhere, some dark shit's going on somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's like,
yeah, I agree with your evidence. Like that is the way she can hook Jaime, even more into this, but I don't know that. I think the other thing is, like you said, that she, this was the only way she could kind of get him over the destruction that she saw with the dragon, but she didn't actually see that destruction, and he did. I mean, I know that was your point, but I got the impression from that scene that she still doesn't really believe that they are as screwed as they are. Totally. Here's Jaime trying to give her the straight truth. Like there's no way we can win against the Dothraki and 3 dragons.
Yeah.
And she's doing everything she can to avoid facing that reality.
It was her Donald Trump moment.
I do think she's pregnant.
There's going to be so much winning in Westeros, so much winning. You're going to be sick of it. Don't ask me how. Don't ask me what the plan is. Just understand that there will be winning. That's all. Cersei out.
We just laugh to keep from crying, basically, at this point.
Yeah, exactly. But she does. We have no prophecy saving us. But she has, and it's not that it's going to save her, but she has that prophecy that she will only have 3 children.
Well,
that's okay. So that said, I mean, is that conceived children? Like, is there a technicality there? Because that was the other thing playing in my mind. I'm like, she already hadn't lost her kids. Like this new kid.
No, because she's already had a stillborn child before the 3.
Oh,
yeah.
Jamie. She had a stillborn with that was Robert's.
Oh, God, I forgot all this stuff. I'm learning so much.
Does she tell Kat about it? She tells someone about, like, there's a real tearful scene where she says, I lost this dark-haired boy, blah, blah, blah.
I don't remember. Maybe it was Ned.
I think it was Ned.
She would talk about the hair color.
Oh, yeah. That's totally what set Ned off on the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And you guys want to know a fun fact from the books about sex and contraceptives in Westeros? So Cersei has like this whole big speech about Ned or whatever, like before, about like how she never got pregnant from Robert Baratheon. There's also this thing that they talk about in the books called moon tea. And it's basically like an abortionate, I suppose, like a contraceptive that you can drink. And I think that's what Qyburn was asking her, is that he was asking her, like, do you want to take, this moon tea and not be pregnant? And she's like, no, I'm good. Like, I want to have this.
Great deep dive there. You're right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm here for.
Do y'all want to know a crazy fact from the real world?
Yeah.
That's what penny royalty is. And so there's this Nirvana song about penny royalty, and the line is like, sit and drink penny royalty, it will distill the life that's inside of me. That's what he's talking about, the tea that would bring about a miscarriage.
Interesting.
So when I read moon tea in the books, I was like, oh yeah, like penny royalty, like that weird Nirvana fact I know.
That's awesome. Lots of good facts and
nothing like abortion talk to
sad
grind conversation to a halt.
Well, let's talk about a character that wasn't aborted, who's back, the best segue of all time. This was the episode that we finally got our answer to: is Gendry still rowing? And the answer is, in fact, no. He's back. He's back, and not only is he back, he's not wasting any goddamn time on anything.
Yeah, love it.
I know. The best.
it's like Davos, poor Davos. He was like, ready to give this whole spiel, and Gendry's like, I'm ready now. He just brings his bag, he's like, he's got everything packed. It's like every day. I have this vision of him every day going into his forge, packing hhis knapsack, getting everything ready. He's like, okay, just in case something happens today, I'm ready to go. I've said my goodbyes. I haven't kept many friends. I just love the efficiency, and it keeps happening throughout the rest. Every time we see him in other scenes, he's just like, "Yep, I'm Gendry." Like his scene with Jon is hilarious because Davos is like, "Now your name is." He's made up a fake name for him. He's like, Clovis. "Your name is Clovis, and you don't say this and you don't say that." And he's like, "Hi, I'm Gendry. I'm Robert Baratheon's son, and our dads were friends, and I'm gonna be your friend." And Jon's just like, "Okay, right, yeah, sure, good." And Davos is just like, "Why the hell am I here?"
Well, but it's perfect. And there's so many minor characters, like to your point that we opened the show with, like about, where we're speeding through some things. Like that's exactly like Gendry. I mean, he was a minor character, but he was never one of the main, protagonists. He was always, like Emily said, an ancillary character. And so, to reintroduce him, we don't need a whole story about like where he's been, like just get him back in there, which is the thing George Martin would not do. I mean, that guy's got like hundreds of pages on the Gravedigger, who's probably the Hound in books 4 and 5.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, just tell us it's the Hound. Like that's what happens with Reek. You read half this book before you realize it's Theon.
Yeah.
So that's how That's how you bring an ancillary character back.
But
I love that he
it.
interrupted Davos when Davos
He's like, "We're ready. I'm ready. Let's leave now." Yeah.
Yeah, Davos is ready to read him like his whole like recruitment spiel. And it's just like, no, we're ready. I do love the fact that they gave us our fan servicey moment where Davos is like, I thought you'd still be rowing. I'm like, ah ha 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 ha. I think we all kind of rejoiced on that. That was lovely. I'm so glad they put that in there.
Yeah, this was another of the scene before, like when they read the Rhaegar thing. This was another when Davos said, "I have business in Flea Bottom." I just go, "Oh my god!" I was like hitting Peter, like, "Oh my god, this is it!" Like he's coming back, like, "Oh my god!" And then you go to the Street of Steel, and it's him. I was just like screamed a little bit because I was like, "Oh my god!" Like this was such a cool way to like bring him back finally. And I think they said like the showrunner said like it wasn't a question of if we were going to bring him back, it was how. Like, and this was such a good way to bring it back.
I didn't even think, and when he said Flea Bottom, that didn't even occur to me until we saw the Smith Forge, and I was like, "Oh my god!" So like you noticed it way before.
He said like when Davos sends him off in the boat, like they talk about it when he's locked up, like, "Oh, I grew up in Flea Bottom too," and then they like Flea Bottom each other, like talk like, "Did you really?" You know, they have all this
each other.
Go back, that they like go back and forth, like, "But I grew up on the street." He's like, "I grew up on this," so like that's how they bonded. And then when he said. Davos told him to get in the boat and like go row for King's Landing, go this way. And he's like, "Are you sure that's what I should do?" And he's like, "No." He says it back to him in the scene of like, "You were right. Like I'm right under the Queen's nose," and she never knew. So as soon as he said Flea Bottom, I'm like, "Oh my god, we're gonna get to see him finally."
That's so cool. What do you think his end game is in this story? And take that along with the fact that he's got this bitchin' hammer that he's forged that looks just kick ass. Which is that? Do either of you know, is that that was the same hammer, or at least stylistically the same hammer Robert carried. Is that, do I remember that correctly?
Yeah, Robert wielded a hammer. I'm not sure what it looks like. They've never really, I think he actually has it in like season 1. They show him having it, like holding it. And I think it may have been more square, but yeah, there's like his whole thing of killing Rhaegar Targaryen in the trident, and he smashed Rhaegar's breastplate with the hammer and smashed all the rubies and sapphires on the armor into the trident and made a lot of soldiers very rich men who collected the rubies from the trident.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I guess, Todd, what do you think?
Baller AF.
Hell yeah. Well, there is a great artist depiction of that scene in the World of Ice and Fire book. Just a beautiful illustration of these two guys horseback, and you got Robert with the antler sort of helmet on, like with his giant ass hammer, and Rhaegar with his sword, just like clashing. It looks killer. Looks amazing. Todd, what do you think Gendry's end game here is? Why bring him back at this juncture?
Oh, I have no idea. I mean, is that just fan service? Emily, do you have an idea on that?
I think we talked about this in the fan theories episode that we did about Gendry, that he is a pretty accomplished smith. And now that they have this mountain of dragon glass, they're going to need someone to help make these weapons for them. And so I think that's going to be his ultimate purpose. Is he's going to be, this sort of Hephaestus-like character of outfitting the armies of the living with these dragon glass swords and, shields and whatever else, knives. But I think he's just kind of like a companion to Jon too, to show that you don't need to be true born, or I guess we know Jon is now, but that your parentage doesn't define you. And I just really like him. And I think him and Arya are probably going to hook it up. But
that would be cool.
Other than that, I think he'll just smith a bunch of stuff.
14 years old. I do remember your Smith theory, and I like that. I just wonder that when he kind of like flat out rejects it and joins them on the Eastwatch party, if that's the direction for him. And so that's where I don't know. I think maybe there's something about him. Maybe there's a way of him turning down the inheritance of the crown or something. I don't know. I'm reaching here. I think there's some lessons he teaches Jon there about being a bastard and not really caring about, what you inherit. Maybe he teaches Daenerys those things. Yeah, we should segue right there to Eastwatch.
Let's do it. Well, let's do it. And let me jump in with a quick little theory. We got the return of Bora at Dragonstone for all of like 30 seconds, and then he's like, I'm off again, which is a little bit. I was like, really? I don't know who said it last week, but I like the idea of him becoming her new hand after Tyrion's failures. I thought that would have been a much better sort of route for him. So I'm like, why bring him back just to send him off again, unless you are looking for a proof. I'm just going to call it the proof zombie to haul back to King's Landing and show everybody. To just get anybody, get any random White Walkers, probably not I just don't see how that's going to work. However, what if Jorah ends up getting bitten or, like half turned or something?
Not a zombie.
Well, or whatever, to the point where he's a zombie, but he can control it, or maybe there's still some humanity in there where he can, they can bring him back. I think it would make really good dramatic sense to have Dany see him in that state.
Yeah, that's all I want now.
Yeah,
like yeah, I want like this moment where he looks down as he's slowly turning white, and he's like, wah, wah, and he kind of shrugs, not again.
Sad.
But it's just like, what else is he? I mean, you're either going to give him a heroic moment on the field where he dies, or that's like, why just bring any random White Walker back? Why not make it one of the guys who's part of that party? That wonderful, wonderful Dungeons and Dragons party that's now formed. I was just like, as soon as they got to the prison, in my head, I was just like, Gendry, warrior, level 7, has joined your party. Doris of Myr, cleric, level 14, has joined your party. And just like down, it was just exactly that. There wasn't really any reason, like, why are you joining the party? It doesn't matter. They just are. Now we're off to fight some White Walkers. I both love that, but also it's kind of like, it was one more example of, let's just gloss over this and get these guys out past the wall. It doesn't really matter. Why not?
Yeah, this is definitely not when we saw that preview of them in the circle, with
the flaming sword.
Yeah. This is not the mission I thought they would be on.
No, right? Not at all. Like, I kind of thought there would have been a much more deliberate or more epic reason for them being together. And even Doris of Myr was like, yeah, we don't, that will be revealed in time, I guess. It doesn't matter why we're all going to where we're going. I just kind of thought, at least tell them what you guys are up to. Like, at least, the Hound could have been like, we're going there because of this. And instead it was just like, no one really knows. We're just hooking up to.
They're just gonna go. I stand by my theory about Jorah, of that in the prophecy of Azor Ahai, of like these three things, that how Lightbringer is formed, of that he first toiled on it for 5 days or whatever, then plunged it into water and it broke. Then he stabbed it in the heart of a lion and it broke. And then his wife asked him to stab her in the heart and use the passion from her heart as the flame. I still think that is his end game. Like that Dany to become, because I believe Dany is Azor Ahai. I think for her to become Azor Ahai, that Jorah will sacrifice himself in that manner for her to forge Lightbringer.
Wow.
So that is my theory about Jorah. The other thing is just like, it's kind of, even if he doesn't die right now, or he's still, when he goes back to Dany, hopefully that this plan works, he can be like, look, this shit is real. Like, I saw them. Like, we need to help them.
That's a good point too. Yeah.
One of the things I'd forgotten about that was in the after show was Benioff and Weiss talking about, like, way back in season 1 or whatever, when Jon sees that white in Castle Black, they actually cut its hand off to send that back to like Robert or Joffrey or whoever was king at that point to prove like this is a real threat. So but hearing about it in the show, it was like, man, I never would have remembered that. Why are you bringing a whole body back? It seemed like a weird proof thing. But
because it didn't move anymore.
Right.
But because it was cut from the body. Because I was talking with Peter about this, of like, well, why didn't they just do that? Like, bring a head or something. It's like, well, I think it has to stay on the person to continue to reanimate.
Yeah. Let's, I guess, finish up by talking about Littlefinger's stupid plan. I don't
agree.
I honestly don't know what the hell this is. Again, it's one more scene that I'm like, do we need this? Do we granted, he doesn't have many end games left. So like, maybe his whole deal is, I'll sow some chaos between these sisters. But you will never convince me that Sansa and Arya aren't playing him. Like there's none of that it doesn't make any sense that Arya, master assassin, didn't know she was being snuck up on by him, or that he was watching her. Like she would know that by now. It doesn't make any sense that Sansa wouldn't tell her. Like I feel like there's a coda to that bedroom scene with Arya and Sansa where she's like, hey, before you go, have you been keeping an eye on Littlefinger? Because he's creeping me the hell out, and we need to team up. And or maybe there's a scene with Bronn being like, "Hey, you guys need to keep an eye on him. He's gonna try some shit, and we need to unite the Starks and shut him down." Like, I just don't see what this is other than a really fun way to put him in his place in the final episode of the Ned's Head, which is this weekend.
Hopefully. I don't. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense to me why Arya would fall for this. Like, why? I mean, yeah, she already hates Cersei. I don't know why she would believe this planted note over, like it just seems like she would doubt Cersei enough to think she made Sansa write that. So
yeah, Emily, you mentioned something about showrunners though.
Yeah, I didn't understand this scene until I watched about the episode or whatever later. I just thought like she's just, and I couldn't, my handwriting myself is really bad, so I couldn't really read the handwriting on the note. And so I thought it was the note that I mean, I was partially right that Sansa wrote to Catelyn to say that Ned was dead, but I forgot that Catelyn was already not there. She was already going off to do something else. And so it's the same thing really that Sansa was made to write this letter to tell Robb to come to bend the knee. But I think it is a stupid plan. Like, I feel like Arya will be like, I get it, Cersei made her write this, but it does kind of, so you can already tell, like, I wanted to talk about this other scene with Arya and Sansa of where Arya's just a creepy weirdo now too. Like Brand is like, she doesn't say much. She just kind of like lurks in shadows and like doorways and stuff, which is fine. She's an assassin. I get that. But like, if she's watching Glover, and I like when Glover opens his mouth, I always say, shut up, Glover, because usually he says stuff that's mean against Sansa. But this time I was too quick because he said like, we should have elected you. And then Roy stands up and says the same thing. And so and then that Arya comes up into Sansa's face and is all like, why would you let them say those bad things about Jon? And I'm like, or you could just be happy that your family's bannermen respect your sister as a ruler.
Totally.
Yeah. I think
that was so weird to me.
Right. And this is one of those problems of when they take seasons to reunite people. I would just think characterization wise, both of these women would understand they're not the woman they were 6 years ago when they left each other.
Well, we had a whole scene last week that showed exactly that.
Right, exactly.
But Arya's like still like, oh, you like nice things, like that. She feel like that maybe she's kind of gotten too deep into this. She suspects everyone kind of stuff of that. She thinks that Sansa is doing this on purpose, and so that's my thing about Littlefinger's plan is that maybe she knows Cersei wrote it. But I have a sister too in real life, and I know that there's some little things that stay with you of that. There's some little bitternesses there that can grow and grow and grow, even if they're out of nothing. And so I think his plan might not have been the most brilliant, but I think that there will come a day when Sansa and Arya have to like really have to talk about all this kind of stuff. But my other thing about this whole scene with them is like, I love that Arya's initial reaction was like, I'm just going to murder these two people. Like, no, please don't. Like, she needs their armies, but she's just like, I'm going to murder them. And Sansa's like, please.
That was a little reckless. I mean, that was a little bit just like, did Jaqen H'ghar teach you nothing? Like, why are you saying
But like she really has like very little end game. I think she kind of missed that. Like once she killed Walder Frey, she just has no other end game besides killing Cersei. And so I don't think she's learned to play the game so much as she should have, as Sansa has all these years.
Well, on that note, let's wrap up. Next week, we have the Ned's Head episode, although it may not be a Ned's Head because of the truncated season.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Something could happen. Something could not happen. It's going to be great. I mean, at the very least, we're going to get some White Walker action, I think, for sure.
Well, I left that quote for you both to see, which was in this interview with Joe Dempsey, who plays Gendry. He said, episode 6, will make. He said episode 4 was insane enough, but episode 6 may even take it up a notch.
That's awesome.
So I think Gendry was just brought back to be part of the Magnificent Seven.
Oh my God, that's what I was calling him too. Did you see my tweet?
Yeah, I'm stealing Emily's tweet.
Okay. Oh my God. Okay. Yeah. Because that's in my mind. I was like, I had to count them. I'm like, okay, is there 7? Okay, great. That's what I'm calling.
No, I love all these things. I saw 7 psychopaths. I saw the 7 samurai. I saw the Magnificent Seven.
I love it.
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait for the after episode where they reference exactly that. Like, we wanted to do our own version of, like, that's exactly what it's going to be. God, there's so much I learned this episode. This is one of my favorite episodes. We covered quite a few cool little facts and theories and all kinds of twists and turns. So hopefully you guys also enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was a good follow-up to last week's. So we don't always get that. So this was good. Yeah,
definitely. Emily, where can folks find you online?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at @EmilyKelly. You can also listen to my podcast here on the Their Network. It's Fan Theories. It's once a month. We just had our July podcast, which is Harry Potter. We have not decided what we will do for August. We actually would love to hear from some of the listeners of the show or this show if you have any suggestions of things that we should cover, whether it's a single solitary topics or such as Harry Potter or like abroad, like the MCU. We do all kinds. So please yell at me about those things. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Todd, where can folks find us and all good things there?
Oh, you should find all of these podcasts at findusthere.org. And we are on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest and all these other wonderful places as Find Us There. And please, we will be, we tweet out and we Facebook out about new podcasts and podcasts that we've done that week. And so please find us there and join the conversation.
Indeed. Well, it's been a great Wednesday in Westeros. To you both, I bid you Azor Ahai.
And 7 blessings, Taylor.
7 blessings, bitches.